Brian Lee. He has a bachelor's degree in egg business from the University of Wyoming and a master's degree in egg economics from Wyoming too, right?
Yep.
And he's stationed at SARCA, right? SARCA, which is a research station somewhere in the state. And he'll be talking to us about the economics on Roundup Ready beets and versus conventional beets.
Alex.
Where's Sark?
It's actually Sarek. That's the experimentation thing just outside of Torrington, so the James C. So, thanks for coming. I'm a research scientist at Sarek. Just started beginning of July, basically, so still kind of getting things figured out and getting into my job. And what I have today for you is actually part of my thesis research that I did. I completed in May, and so yeah, go over this with you. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So what I wanted to look at in my thesis, this was a year and a half ago we started looking at this, and there's some uncertainty on whether GM sugar beets were going to be regulated or deregulated by the government. And we found out last July that in fact they were deregulated. They can be produced. They're fine. So that question is kind of gone, but this is still valid and valuable to producers to see profitability of the GM sugar beets as compared to conventional beets. And also, as part of my thesis, we did a whole farm model. So we have all these crops. What's the optimal acres I should produce on my farm, given a certain range of crops? And so when producers are facing market risk, so price fluctuations, stuff like that. What's the optimal mix of crops to maximize my whole farm profit? And then also, what's the potential profit of producing sugar beets? So for the analysis on my thesis, I did a Monte Carlo simulation, and then also a whole farm linear programming model. You don't really need to know what that is, but all you need to know is that this Monte Carlo simulation was used to look at varying input and output prices within GM and conventional sugar beet budgets. And the goal for that is to see which type of beet, GM or conventional, is going to be more profitable and how often. And then that feeds into the whole farm linear programming model. So same idea, varying input and output prices within certain crop budgets. And then to see how best to use the acres on your farm to maximize profit. So to set this up, University of Nebraska is a good resource for crop budgets, and that's actually what crop budgets that I used for my thesis came from. And then I also used historical price data to form basically a distribution to put into these budgets that will vary over different situations and things within these budgets. And so to get started, just to give you an idea of kind of where the general budget sits, I used 2010 data, so I used 2010 fertilizer prices, 2010 sugar beet prices, and 2010 fuel prices, and just put them into these budgets to see what would happen given I have GM sugar beets and conventional sugar beets.
The good old days, right?
Yeah. And as you can see here, yeah, I think sugar price at this time was about $61.50, something like that, per ton. And as you can see, just using 2010 prices, there's about $81 difference. And I also have to say that this is considering a 2-ton per acre yield bump for the GM. So I've seen journal articles out there that say anywhere from there should be a yield bump in between 5 and 15%. This is right about 7-8%, something like that. So we're in there. So that's what we assume given these budgets.
Question.
Yeah.
On your total cost for field operations, you show your conventional being cheaper. That must not take into account for labor?
Labor was one of the big questions we had in these budgets. So even if you can find, well, because in the conventional budget, we actually consider and use manual field laborers in that budget. So that's a big question right there. So I mean, if you can find manual labor, at what what do you have to pay them to do that? So that was one of the questions and one of the causes for variability. And this is that you might not be able to find field labor. So what happens then, or what do you have to pay them?
But is that figured in your cost?
Yes, that is in there. Okay. And so this is after the Monte Carlo analysis. So basically, I have these historical prices and form a distribution around those prices. Basically, take those and make 10,000 more data points. Then run those through that budget and then get a whole bunch of data. And so this is kind of the outcome for that. This is our GM sugar beets, considering a 26 ton per acre yield. And so 95% of the time, that profit in that budget was between $383 and $1,500. So you can see right there, the huge variability that just putting those prices through that budget causes. And then for like conventional, we're right about $319 to $1,351. So as you can see, consistent but lower than the GM. And so from the first part of this, these are just some of my outcomes. We ran it a couple different ways. So some get, everybody's operation is different. You might see a 2 ton per acre yield bump, or you might not. So what happens when you don't see that? So we ran it a couple different ways. Conventional, high cost, and you see a 24 acre or ton per acre yield. And then we also ran that at a low cost. And after talking with some of the plant scientists on campus and stuff, they thought that maybe our, maybe herbicide prices are a little bit lower than they should have been, or maybe we have to add a little bit because of manual labor, something like that. What happens when you have a high cost versus low cost? As you can see here, the mean changes pretty drastically. And we also can compare that to a GM sugar beet with a 24 ton. So you're able to compare this to these straight across with equal yield. So if they yield the same, what would you do? If I have high cost, I might raise conventional sugar beets if I know I can't get 26 ton per acre out of my GM sugar beets. And then our 26 ton per acre sugar beets are over there. And as you can see, the minimums on all of these are negative. So that would be like an extreme case. You've got low sugar price, you've got high input price. So you're not guaranteed to make a profit, but that would be an extreme case. But this is just to give you an idea of kind of general profitability using these set budgets. So, your operations are obviously going to be different than what these budgets have set up. So, okay, so what can we say from this? What can I show that we've done? In general, GM sugar beets would be more profitable given price fluctuations, and also that would be assuming a 2 ton per acre yield increase. Also found that sometimes you might not see that 2 ton per acre yield increase. What do you need for you to break even? Found that at those prices that we use need a 0.33 ton per acre yield increase in order to make GM sugar beets worth growing. If it's less than that, maybe you don't want to grow them. It's not worth it. Not worth paying the technology fee and all that.
Is that mainly based on the increased price of the seed? I mean, at
yes.
that point,
Yes.
it would be.
Most of that is that technology fee. So.
How long will that technology fee be?
What's that?
How long will that technology fee run out? As long as Monsanto wants it to?
They're still paying it on the corn.
Yeah.
You know how it's.
Yeah, But I think there is an end in sight on the corn. I don't know when it is.
That's a great question. Who knows? Right, and then so the average increase in profitability that we found was around $95. Okay, so bear with me on this. So what I do is I took the budgets that I found for those sugar beets, the GM and the conventional, and I basically added a corn crop, I added hay crop, I added dry bean and wheat crop budgets. And basically what I do is add those all together and say I have a fixed set of inputs that I can use. I have fixed land. Here's the crops that I can raise. What should I do? Based on rotation constraints and stuff like that. What should I do? I have these crops. Same thing, I used University of Nebraska budgets, used the same historical prices, and then did 7 different scenarios based on different crop rotations. I'll go over those right now, pretty soon here.
And once again, these are based on 2010, right?
No, these are these are historical data. So I took 40 years of Roundup data, 40 years of fertilizer data, and basically created 10,000 different data points that are based off the distribution of those. So I took a little bit of data, and I could tell how those change over year to year, and I'm able to create 10,000 more that follow that same kind of pattern as far as how they can fluctuate. And so they're all normalized to 2011 prices, so I've accounted for inflation. So, I wanted to determine the optimal crop rotations for a whole farm, given that a producer has sugar beet contracts that are equal to 1/3 of the total acres of your farm. And another group of scenarios is to determine optimal crop rotations for a whole farm, given that producer is able to choose to grow sugar beets on less than or equal to 1/3 of those total acres. And the last one, looking at the effects of a ban on GM sugar beets under the assumption that no conventional beet seed is available. So what would have happened last July if sugar beets were regulated? What would a producer do? Would he go back to conventional beets, or would he find something else to do? So this might be a little busy, but these are just the constraints that I put up. And so here's my 7 different scenarios across the top. And basically, I fed these into the computer and said, okay, I've got conventional sugar beets and I've got Roundup British sugar beets. I know I have to produce 1/3 of the acres on my farm with the sugar beets. And I let it choose between conventional or Roundup British sugar beets. I also said that corn can't be more than 1/3 of my total acres. And I also assumed that dry beans, due to the rotation, that dry beans go with sugar beets. I also assumed that. So that was just scenario A. Scenario B, I say I have to raise Roundup Ready. Scenario C, I say I have to raise conventional. No Roundup Ready is available. And how does that affect the rest of the crops? And then these, I say, okay, I'm able to adjust how many sugar beet contracts I want to buy. I can produce less than a third of the sugar beet, or of the acres on my farm to sugar beets. So what am I going to do with the other crops on my farm as far as my rotation? And then the last scenario, G, I say Roundup British sugar beets were deregulated, or were regulated. But because of the high acceptance of GM sugar beets, which I think currently it's 95% total acres in the US are GM sugar beets, maybe there's no conventional sugar beet seed out there that I can plant. I can't get my hands on it, but what do I do then? So I say no sugar beets, and I can't have more than 2/3 of total acres on my farm to corn, because corn's probably going to be the highest profitability crop that I can raise on the rest of those acres. And you don't want to have corn on corn, so that's why I say you only have 2/3 of total acres to corn. And this is what we found. So this is just general crop profitability before all those rotations are put in there. As you can see, Roundup British sugar beets had the highest average profitability per acre, but followed very closely by conventional sugar beets. And yeah, these maximums look really good. I mean, check out dry beans right here. Check out corn, $4,500 per acre. Yeah, I'll take that. But no, that's not going to happen. So those again would be like an extreme case. So the average is a little bit more meaningful. And then we were talking about risk this morning. We were talking about being risk averse, risk loving. This CV right here, this is basically just to measure, be able to tell how risky that crop is. So it's actually the standard deviation divided by average. So if you look, Roundup British sugar beets and conventional sugar beets are actually, compared to the rest of them, fairly non-risky. Pretty good. It'll bring down the average of the rest of your farm. Whereas you look at corn, pretty big fluctuation in those total profitabilities. Makes it, and that's what tells me it's a little bit more risky crop compared to what else I've got here. And so then, these are those scenarios that I ran, these 7 scenarios. So scenario A, I say, have to raise a third sugar beets. You choose what it is. This is not the highest profitability, but it's also fairly non-risky. So just going through there, the highest average profitability, this scenario, E and D, and that's where you're able to adjust how many sugar beet acres you can produce. This isn't necessarily real world, right? Because you have to lock in your sugar beet contracts before. So, but if you're able to, this is over time, so that would be if you were able to over time adjust where you were going and what you wanted. And then maximum again right here. This looks pretty good. That's when we had no sugar beets. So that is going to be mostly corn, raising all corn. Really high max looks good. Really low minimum. That's because this is a lot more risky than if we had sugar beets in our crop rotation. Any questions on that?
You gonna tell us what makes that more risky?
Yeah.
It seems strange that it would come out that corn is more risky than beets.
I think it's actually due mostly to the prices that were in there, the historical prices that were in there, and also the heavy usage of fertilizer. So sugar beets take a lot of fertilizer too, but corn does as well, but also I think the prices were a lot more brutal. So when it's run through there, it's saying, we've had really high corn prices. We've also had tanked corn prices. So I think that's making up a lot of that.
When did we get Roundup Ready corn? I mean, that's been around for what, 5 years?
No, corn or beets?
Corn.
Corn's been around for 12 years maybe?
Yeah.
Been a long time, but I'm just wondering if with the historic data that you were using, you know, we've completely revamped how we farm corn now too, and your expenses would maybe indicate that.
Well, Roundup is in here, so is fertilizer, so is corn prices. So I think that corn prices and fertilizer prices will help explain a lot of that, even though I only have, I think I have maybe 10, 12 years of Roundup prices that NASA's reported. So yeah, that's gonna cause a lot of variability, seeing as I only have 10 years of Roundup data. So that's a very good point.
Have you still got all your formats on how you calculated this? Because it would be really fun to run this like on the last 3 years now, with fuel prices and fertilizer and crop prices like they are. I mean, it would be real eye-opening for us.
And I'll bring this up a little bit later, but one of the things that we're gonna have to face here in the future is what happens when we've got Roundup Ready tolerant weeds. How is that gonna affect herbicide usage? You know, if we can't use Roundup anymore, we're gonna have to find something else, you know, switch up our rotations. So that, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, because, you know, Andrew Kness, he's one of the plant scientists at the university, and, you know, Wyoming is the only state that is encircled by other states that have documented Roundup Ready tolerant weeds. We don't yet. You know, why is that? Well, you know, but it's right around the corner, so it's going to happen. But how are we going to adjust when that happens?
Yeah, and Andrew's forecast is in 3 years we're going to have Roundup resistant weeds. So the Roundup Ready systems are going to have to fundamentally change, which really to us means increased cost.
Yeah. Different herbicides.
Could part of that be because some of the rotations like soybeans and barley doesn't have the Roundup Ready components, so as you're rotating through, you're killing that weed with a different chemical?
Yeah, but not everybody's doing that, right?
Well, I think in our area, everybody rotates, but you get in corn areas or soybean areas, it's corn up, corn.
Yeah.
And there are, in Wyoming, primarily we rotate because of the
I mean, back home, I'm from southwest Nebraska, we've got heavy silty soils, sandy soils. You know, a lot of guys, it's corn on corn on corn on corn. Don't care how much Roundup they have to spray. They're going corn. It doesn't matter. And pouring the water to it. So, I mean, you might have a really good crop rotation, be doing everything sustainably, responsibly, but the guy next to you might not be. So, I think it's just a matter of time. So. But it'll be interesting to see how it changes, how we guys have to adapt. So some of the things we can take from this, found that total farm profits were 4.7% lower when GM sugar beets were not available. And when no sugar beets were available, profits were on top of that 5% lower. So sugar beets in rotation is good. If you have the availability to grow them, that's good. And then also, again, corn has the highest profit potential, but it also has the greatest variability. So that's some of that risk coming in there. And then GM sugar beets have the highest average profit and the lowest variability of profit. So it kind of help straighten out your profit line, help you manage risk a little bit better. So when sugar beets are in crop rotation, profitability is lower, while variation in profit is greater. And then assuming that 2 ton per acre yield increase, GM sugar beets are about $95 more profitable than conventional. And in order to make GM sugar beets pay, on my farm, I'm going to have to see 0.33 tons per acre yield difference in order to make GM sugar beets worth it. So, all your situations are different. You probably have an idea of where you're sitting at. So this is just what I found.
This data was off of Nebraska data, then, is that what you're saying?
It was Nebraska budgets, but it was national data. So national data for 1034.0 fertilizer, 32 fertilizer, 1052, Roundup prices, corn prices,
And I would agree with you there, because Western Sugar hasn't seen the yield bump in Nebraska as we've seen in all the other states.
yeah.
Level, for example, we were at 21 or 22 ton average, and we're averaging 29 and 30 or better. And Nebraska was pretty flat, and all of a sudden they had this big jump ladder.
So you probably have an idea of what you were getting on conventional beets, what you can get from GMPs.
Well, one thing I would add, I was talking to Andrew, is he said there's a couple other traits introduced at the same time that may account for some of the additional yield. There's what, I don't know, for DT, but he said there's 3 or 4 traits introduced at once.
It's just not the Roundup.
And that variety has, you said, probably seen bigger than a 10% yield bump, but how much of that's actually attributed to the Roundup Ready technology and not the other traits that were introduced at the same time. So that's where we have a hard time trying to figure out.
Disease resistance and stuff like that. They're able to stack them on there now.
Exactly.
As a general rule, I keep going back to your expenses, and I gotta think that, you know, a couple passes of spraying Roundup is cheaper than, you know, several passes with the cultivator and the fuel costs and the labor costs.
The thing that you don't see with beets, and I was gonna argue the point too, is that you gotta remember, you're figuring the tech fee in there. The tech fee replaced a lot of our cultivator fees that you would have in the tractor.
That offsets that one.
Yeah, and that's why it makes it so much closer. In corn, where the tech fees is less, corn prices have came down. Our beet seed prices are ridiculous. Plus, you slap the tech fee on top of that, and that's why these numbers look, when you think about it.
I figured the tech fee for this is $75 per acre. That's what I figured the tech fee just for the seed was. So, and to tell you the truth, that was
higher than the seed price.
And I'd also argue, your point is well taken, is that you had that high cost conventional seed too, which had, because again, when we did this, Andrew did a lot of surveys on how people actually grew sugar beets, and I think there were 17 people he surveyed, and there were 15 different systems, right? So the low cost ones, we kind of figured the most profitable, and there was less tillage anyways, figured you probably didn't have as much weeds, but that high cost thing, there's what, 2 or 3 times more tillage operations going on.
Center pivots.
So that may impact, right, profitability as well, so it's getting to your more higher costs. And also in that first slide, I believe that's actual Roundup price, not generic, right? And the generic is a lot less than Roundup branded, right? This glyphosate was like $3 versus the average was like 10 or something for. So there's a couple different things, right, that are, I mean, you can change any of those numbers to get entirely different things. But that first slide where we had high cost and low cost conventional, those are kind of the extremes that we saw in the area based on what Andrew had done with his weed research. So it gets kind of to your point, is that higher cost one may have been more realistic what people were really doing around here. So we were optimistic.
I think one of the benefits that we don't really, I mean, it's hard to put a figure on, is, you know, when you don't have to dry your field down to cultivate twice, there's huge benefits to being able to recap that, keep that plant growing as opposed to running through it with a sprayer real quickly and get the water back on. I mean, how do you calculate that?
Yeah,
that's a huge,
so
huge.
There's a ton of other externalities that are going on here, right? But this is just, you know, dollars and cents. So this is what he's talking about. This low cost conventional right here. Yeah, it's more profitable than an equal yielding GM. This was about $63 per acre for herbicide on that conventional. So, I mean, you probably know, about what it would take. That's pretty darn low. So we're saying, awfully conservative.
That's why it's called low cost.
So,
kind of like, they're the best of the best.
Awfully conservative. So, but that's, that's what it would take to beat this. I think that's what I had, except I didn't want to say, talking about the tech fees a little bit. These prices figured at a 2-ton per acre yield increase. The current tech fee that I use, so $75 per acre, would be underpriced by $95. So basically that profit gain that you get from that GMC.
And before everyone gets upset,
Yeah.
the reason we did this is Andrew's done a lot of studies, and a lot of people are publishing that as underpriced by $400, that Monsanto could in fact charge you an additional $400 before it actually hurts your profits compared to conventional seeds. So we've actually said that was overstated. So I just want to say that, we said the previous research actually overstated the benefit of that technology by roughly threefold. So.
And at no yield difference, so you have conventional beets, you have GM beets, you see 0 yield difference, the tech fee would be overpriced by $20. So it's just some of the things we found kind of interesting. And then just to kind of give you an idea of other things that were going on. These were fixed budgets and assuming fixed yields. So every time those different numbers went through those budgets, that yield would stay the same. So that's something we could look at in the future, is start playing with that and see how that affects it then. Other things to consider, this was under center pivot irrigation. Obviously, every farmer is different, everybody's going to have a different operation. And then soil types are different, and this was the low cost conventional sugar beet herbicide program. So some of the things we're looking forward to in the future, take this, adapt it to the Bighorn Basin area. Weed resistance and glyphosate, what are we going to do? How's that going to adjust profits? And another thing we didn't consider in this was sugar content variability and how that would affect your profit on the end. So that's something that we can look at in the future, and I think it'd be pretty interesting. So that's all I have. If you guys have any questions.
Is there a difference in the sugar content of genetically modified sugar beets? What's your studies told you?
I think everything that Andrew's done, he has seen a difference. I think it's minimal, but
What's Western Church saying?
We didn't see, there's not a big bump in sugar content, but what we see is purities are better because you have less competition from weeds.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the more paid on sugar content as your crop, you know, higher up your sugar content goes, the more money you get per ton.
What have you seen on yield increase?
Well, we were seeing, it's a variety-driven thing, but we don't really see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can get, Roundup Ready beets have really lagged because we went through the lawsuit area and research, or the seed companies were not willing to risk going any farther than they did to a certain point because they were spending a lot of money trying to, they didn't know whether whoever was going to, if they were even be able to do it because it's expensive to make these varieties, so they stopped. And so we're on the bottom end of what we're seeing, what we're going to see, I think, as far as that goes.
what were yields like up here this year?
20, I think the level average, almost 29 ton was the average. So we had Emblemount, their average over 30 ton as a station.
At 17 seconds,
Yeah, and our sugar content has been pretty stable.
Hasn't the Louisville factory historically been better purity anyway?
Yeah, it's the, we have the highest purity of all our, in the 4-state area, but it's because of our soil conditions. We have that gravel layer that we leach all our fertilizers away, and our purity's a lot lower.
Does that mean there's less sugar in the wheat pulp?
It's supposed to be.
Surely there's some research. Surely there's some research going on about what's going to happen down the road when we get, weed resistance to Roundup. I mean, I realize that the chemical companies have got to go through the USDA to get approval, but if they just change even a tiny bit of that Roundup to some other.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens as far as.
I can tell you from the grower's standpoint, if we start getting resistance, then we have to go back to conventional. I mean, a lot of guys will just quit because we can't find liver.
Yeah.
It's non-existent right now. And some of our chemicals, they're not even existent. You can't even get some of the chemicals that we used to use now. They don't even make them because there's no mess, not harmful.
And how many of us have put our cultivators out in the backyard and forgot about them? I mean, truly.
But there's a, you know, I mean, that's their stressing, the sugar company's stressing it, all the chemical companies, rotation. You know, different modes of action, you know, you don't see it in beets because we don't rotate beets after beets, but the problem is in the areas that are rotating corn or soybeans year after year after year.
You know, one of the big crops in the Bighorn Basin is alfalfa. And now we've got Roundup Ready alfalfa, and from what we've seen, we're never gonna plant conventional alfalfa again if we can help it. I mean, you just cannot believe the difference. We can't, even with our poor farming practices, so. I know that there's gonna be, you know, Roundup corn, Roundup alfalfa, Roundup beets, and then we throw in beans and barley, and maybe we get a little bit.
But there's different, you know, Liberty stuff that they can put on corn now. Liberty Link is a different mode of action than glyphosate. There used to be a Liberty for sugar beets when they first started this deal. I don't know where that ever went. I guess they kind of abandoned that. But that was going to be kind of nice because you'd have two modes.
Didn't give you some control.
Huh?
Didn't give you
Yeah, I
some
think so
control.
probably. But it was pretty young right now because they're still starting to see some things with Liberty and corn.
Mhm.
Yep, it'll be interesting. I'm sure they're working on it. Monsanto's labs.
Probably Monsanto's working on it.
Yeah.
Get the darn figures.
No, the tech piece is what's killing us right now. And they left that flat last year, but this year they kicked through everything here.
$75 an acre is outrageous. I mean, it really is. Big
You work at the
$150
experiment station there at Franklin?
Yep, in Lincoln.
Okay, what was, there's a lot of talk about, especially in the organic people, are talking about sustainable agriculture. What is your definition of sustainable?
Oh, well.
Previous years.
We're paying you, we're paying
Well,
I
I think it's kind of twofold. I mean,
Never heard of that.
if you ask any producer out there, sustainable might be being able to farm into the future, take care of the soil, take care of his animals, take care of his family. I mean, but for me, when I look at it, I mean, I'm an economist, right? So I'm looking at, can I afford to farm next year? So I think that brings in a little bit of sustainability question. So, but I mean, are we doing everything we can to do as best we can and be efficient about it?
Well, sometimes you guys scare us. Because if you start putting in, you know, USDA does that crop production study every so often, you know, and they always want, as a sugar grower, to put everything you can think about in there. You just have, and you, if I'm a farmer and I look at that, I would never farm sugar beets for what they show it costs. But really, it's a reality. It's probably what it is. But you spread the cost over everything, and then you start thinking more on a cash flow basis.
Can I answer that question? I can tell you what the definition of sustainability is according to the mission statement of SERC. Of SERC. The way SERC has defined sustainability is agricultural systems that are economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially acceptable. So it hits all three of those components that were mentioned earlier today. And then you can further define what that might be according to any production system that you're talking about. But the bottom line is, it has to make money, it has to be viable enough to continue the production system into the future so it's ecologically sound, and obviously it needs to be socially acceptable. That social acceptance could be an acceptance by the individual farmer, or we receive a ton of pressure from a variety of different groups, and so it needs to be acceptable to the general public. You know, if they're coming out and I'll just take a cattle example, and the cattle look poor to the public, that's not going to be socially acceptable. So that social acceptance is one area that's really difficult to define because it's a variety of social aspects that one needs to satisfy.
The reason I ask that is I come across a UN thing called United Nations Agenda 21. It's an 8-pound document, And their definition, and it's the whole gist of it, in my opinion, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, is to bring the level of the United States standard of living down to the third world nations to equalize everything. Now, their definition of sustainable agriculture is completely different than what you just said. And so when you see this, we had a PhD economist talk to us, he's a nutritionist, graduated from University of Wyoming, but works in Colorado feedlots. He told us a year and a half ago that if we were to be able to feed the world, I think he said by 2050 when it's 10 billion people, you would have, at current production levels, we're going to have to clear an area the size of the South American continent and farm it to feed them. Well, we don't have that land anywhere in the world. So he also said that we need to have technology with this GMO stuff, bringing corn yields to 400 bushel. Right now it's about 163 on the average. So you see all this technology and stuff. Well, to raise 400 bushel corn is going to take a whole lot more inputs than just 20 ton of manure to the acre. So that's why I was trying to wrap my mind around what does sustainability mean, and it means different things to different people.
Yeah, exactly, and I think a lot of people have misinterpreted what sustainability means and have linked it to organic or natural, and that's not the case. GMO technology is probably highly sustainable. Well, not probably, it is highly sustainable, right? Because it increases efficiency, it increases the economics of the operation. Now, where the issue comes in is it socially acceptable? You know, we have a segment of the population that do not accept the technology. They think it's bad.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the whole struggle with it being totally sustainable comes in, is that social aspect where it's difficult to get your arms around. It's easy for us to understand the economics and the ecological components. That's what we live in. But understanding that other giant out there that's kind of an amoeba that moves all the time and it's a different form every time we're tackling it, that's really where the issue is.
And it really goes back to Monsanto's failure to educate the public before they introduced that first GMO product. They just introduced it cold, and the naysayers were able to generate a lot of support. Now they're trying to educate the public, and that's what we need to do. Us 2% of ag people in the nation need to get information out there that's scientific, that's reliable, that talks about the impact of GMOs or the non-impact thereof, especially if it goes through food processing. You know, we need to get that word out there. But you know, one other thing I wanted to talk about sustainability in the Bighorn Basin is I have been approached over the last 6 years. I've probably been approached 3 times by field men from other companies from California, from Idaho, looking for acreage. In other words, farming acreage is closing down in California due to lack of water, in Idaho because of urban involvement, urban growth. There is basically no ag anymore around Boise or Nampa. And those field men were coming here looking for acreage for pretty valuable crops. I mean, seed crops for vegetables, that kind of thing. But it would involve a major change in what we do here, and changing our crop system, changing what we're willing to grow. And the seed grass guys have gotten into a higher priced product of the seed. So I don't know, you guys have a lot more history in what's possible here in the Bighorn Basin, but is it possible to change crops so that maybe we add more years to our rotation? Instead of a 3-year rotation, go for a 4 or 5-year rotation in something.
I think when you've seen it already in sugar beets, because our yields are going up and our factories are behind now. We can't process. That's why you're seeing acreage cut back, because we can't process all the beets that we're producing because our yields have jumped so high. So you're seeing growers going to have to replace 10 or 15% of their acreage with something else. Because right now, with 85% of the beets that you would typically rate, you're producing what you would on 100% of your regular. And so you're seeing, I think you're going to see more guys looking for whatever, because you know we can always
plant beans and more barley and corn.
Well, what we need is a value added, something where we can add value to the crop that comes off the field, and then we can market that.
And I think the thing that you gotta remember is you can't you can change crops, but you can't change climate. I
Right.
mean, obviously, if there was other crops that could be grown in the Bighorn Basin,
I think the research
We would be
center's done a
finding
pretty
them.
decent job trying to find those.
we're not
crops
gonna
that
find
would
it.
fit.
We're not gonna be planting lettuce when we get frost at the end of May and into June. You know, I mean, we can't do it.
Well, sunflowers is a new one, and Lyle Levelo brought that company
But that's
in.
not really a new one, that's an old one, it's been here
Yeah.
for years.
Okay.
And we've tried it off and on, I've been farming for over 30 years, and we've tried it 3 different times. And one of the big issues that we brought it in, we took it back out, we brought seed in for a few years, but the whole thing that was about seed issue was getting it out of here. Freight is an issue all the time, but we can raise, we had the outfit, I don't know what it was, one of the seed outfits. They loved coming in, and we raised seed for 3 or 4 years, and it's a different type of deal, because you're planting males and females, and you gotta robe them, and they really liked it, but I'm not sure why, I can't remember why they left, but a lot of it was freight.
It
Did you
may,
see that in California where they raised a lot of the seed for sunflowers? The same thing's happening, they're looking for other areas.
right, and so one of the points might be that we could be approaching a point at which being able to produce it on acres outweighs the cost of shipping.
Well, and then, when we were kids on Hart Mountain, when my dad homesteaded up there and Lynn's dad homesteaded up there were thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of seed peas raised. You don't see a seed pea anywhere anymore. And then Cali had a canning company, and Red Lodge had a canning company. We raised lots and lots of canned peas, green peas. Wonderful way to seed alfalfa. Good livestock feed, the whole works. But none of it available anymore. So, and radishes, there was
Okay.
hundreds and hundreds of acres of radish seeds, radish seed raised. I see a few acres, Kenny Borcher had some. You know, and so there's a lot of that kind of variety, but like you said, you're restricted to weather and climate more than
I worry a little bit about sunflowers too, because I don't know,
crop. That's
the research is able to tell us because you hear about the guys who raise a lot of sunflowers, and they're they're a miner.
yeah.
Or water, yeah.
For nutrients. They're a nutrient miner, and they're hard on the ground.
Yeah, and also they carry over the lygus bug. In other words, you get your lygus bug first and second instars on the alfalfa, you spray it, but then any escapes will go later on, you'll have them on the sunflower too.
You know, the other thing that we talked about with sustainability is, you know, we think it would be wonderful if we could get 400 bushel corn, but in the end, supply and demand is really what dictates whether we get paid for that crop. And if we overproduce, like the beets, you know, they're pushing that plant really hard. We've seen it in the dairy industry, you know. You can have a very viable product and a very good product, and if there's more product out there than is being taken up. So I think our big concern is education to the community and to the nation. I'll give you an example. I was over in Idaho last week, or 2 weeks ago, and there's a processing plant over there that produces non-homogenized milk. Who in this room knows what non-homogenized milk is?
Everybody
Okay, look at the ages of everybody that raised their hands, and you'll see, non-homogenized milk is milk that just hasn't gone through the separator to where it's dispersed the milk fat. In other words, we used to be able to shake our milk, you know, when we drank it because we wanted to mix the cream up. Now you don't have to do that. This processor said to me, he said, you know, the people that like non-homogenized milk are very faithful. They stay with you, regardless of what you put the price on it, they stay with you because they understand it. But he said, you cannot educate the younger families that are using a lot of milk right now because they just think there's something wrong with it because we've gone away from it, okay? Education is the key. I truly think education is the key for all aspects of agriculture.
Well, when they were talking this morning, I don't know what the university, whether they have a Carnegie specialist comes in, because I think there's getting our voice out. I think there's a lot of good people in the room that can't stand up in front. I mean, they have a lot of great ideas. You said with the one-on-one, they'll give you their life story and not you skip a beat, but you standing in front of the screen up there.
You know, like that.
But I think if either through the extension of the district, through the university, you know, the public speaking is very important in to get your voice out. And I don't think we have enough people that are comfortable doing that.
Well, the other thing I see as a possibility, but doesn't seem to fly, is that just like your Western Sugar, a group of farmers has a lot more power and financial reserves than just one. And so if you've got a crop that could have some value added to it, or a dairy that could have some ice cream and cheese making facility, but you need venture capital, a group of cooperative farmers who put out venture capital could change what happens around here, I think.
They tried a barley, what was it here? It's been 20 years, and they tried the barley association or whatever we call it back then. They thought that they could help contract our barley. And but those beer companies just flat said, here it is, good luck.
We've tried it with livestock, you know, where if any of you have ever tried to market livestock, you know, the pot loads, the load trucks that sell. And so we thought, well, we'll just get 3 or 4 little guys together and we'll pool our animals.
Nobody showed up.
Well, we all had different sizes, different breeds. There was no consistency to it, so there was no great draw for us to build. I mean, we live in an area where we're all kind of independent and kind of doing our own thing.
Strong-minded, yes.
We all want to be viable.
And everyone else does too. Western Sugar, we've been fortunate enough to have a good bunch of packaging facilities, and we've capitalized on that. But now the other sugar companies around the U.S. have noticed what we've been doing, so they're putting packaging plants now too. And it's all right down because we're overproducing.
Yeah, no, there's too many of us, huh?
I have 2 examples that I want to bring up. When my kids were small, we had a milk cut. It goes right back to what he said. We had a separator, so we separated some, we had some kind of top. And we had, because we had 6 kids, we had lots of kids come over and eat dinner with us. And if we poured milk in a pitcher, the first question was, where did that milk come from? You'd say, that black and white cow right over there. They wouldn't drink it. But if we poured it into an old milk container, like a plastic gallon jug, they drank it and then it would be, man, this is the best milk we ever drank. Where'd it come from? That black and white cow. But then they didn't care then. They just loved it and they'd come back. Another thing we do is if we knew one of the kids was having a friend over, we'd take some cream and put a pint of cream in a quart jar. Then we'd say, and set them out on the counter, let them come to room temperature, but we leave one in the refrigerator. Like, you guys want to make butter? Yeah. So the kids would all drive home, they go down and watch TV. And say, this is how you do it. Just rock it while you're watching TV. You're saying, I got butter, I got butter, I got butter. But that poor kid from town, his wasn't turned. Didn't even shaky. You know, this, what happens is, cream won't turn to butter, that's its room temperature. We never did tell them kids, but they just could not figure out why them farm kids could turn that butter. So, but it's an education thing, and the supply thing. When you go from here to Billings and you go past the little cemetery there at Edgar, and then off the hill there's a little sign that says Farmer Lee's Potato Patch. You can go up there and you can buy potatoes from sea rates up there. Several years ago he told me that the price of potatoes was really good. The Potato Growers Association in Idaho told the guys, please do not overplant your potatoes this year. They overplanted 25,000 acres and they hit a bumper crop. Ruined the price of potatoes. They had potatoes that they were hauling out whole in the springtime because it was rotten in the cellars. So sometimes producers can be their own worst enemy too. But how do we educate? That's the part that I've always wondered for a long time. How do we educate, like my farmers market people? How do I educate my farmers market people as to what's going on?
I know we're running short on time, but I had one idea when they were talking about the general meeting this morning about students at UW. How do we get those students to see what commodity farming is like? And over the 6 years, I've mentioned to various farmers, hey, you could be a mentor, you could bring an intern to your farm, you would have to pay them a salary and teach them something over the summer, and they say, that's too much work, I don't want to do that. So how about an idea of farmers in the Bighorn Basin or statewide funding a bus trip, funding a 1-week bus trip in April or May, where they bring a busload of agroecology students up from Laramie to the Bighorn Basin. They spend 5 days just going around from farm to farm in the Bighorn Basin and having conversations with farmers. Granted, it's a short time experience, but at least they would see commodity farms, because I'll guarantee you in that agroecology program, they are only seeing horticulture topics. They are not seeing any commodity or livestock farms. So I don't know, if that's an idea, is could we fund a bus trip for UW students for 1 week in April or May? They just have to bring their homework with them and do it on the bus or something.
I can tell you that at Northwest, that idea, we have a course called Agricultural Operations Studies, where we've gone to Minneapolis, San Francisco, Oregon, Amarillo, and back, and done exactly that. It's one of the best experiences that the students have while they're here. And they see a variety, they see experiment stations, they see dairies, they see ethanol, they see slaughter plants, you name it. And it's been...
It'd be a way, you guys don't want to go down to Laramie and talk to them. I mean, I can't seem to make that happen. But if we could bring a busload of them up here, or a 16 passenger bus, or...
There's two distinct things that you talk about. Are you wanting manual labor people, or setting tubes and chasing cows and milking cows and got a shovel in their hand, or are you talking about somebody who's wanting to learn the management skills of it to be able to do the business aspect of it? Because there's two complete different divisions of labor on a farm.
And it all comes down
What Rick
to time.
and Bob and these guys do is they're managing their farms and their dairies and those kind of things where, you know, they don't need very many of them, but they sure need a lot of workers. But
I think we still set a tube once in a while.
I'm sure you have to.
It's a matter of pride that he can still do that.
I think we need to, if we're going to start anywhere, we need to start in the high schools here. Our local kids here, there's not very many farm kids in that school anymore. And it was a couple years ago, I got approached, and they have a program, like, I can't think what the name of it was. They did exactly this. They were supposed to decide whether Roundup sugar beets were good or not. The question was, are Roundup sugar beets good or not? And it was part of the thing, and so they all had different aspects of it. And, you know, we brought them out to my farm, and I showed them, here's Roundup, here's what we do for Roundup, and I had all the 8 different things that we were spraying on them then, and here's Roundup, the one jug sitting right here. And then we went through the economics of it. I took them out and showed him all the planters, and I showed him our cultivators that are sitting here rusting now, because we're not even using them now. And you know, we're the basis of all their information. And then they're supposed to come at the end, they gave a little speech at the end there, you know, and I thought they did, we were all interested in everything. You know what their conclusion was at the end of that? Roundup sugar beets are bad for the country. Oh. But you know where they got all their information? Right off the internet. It was 99% based off what they saw on the internet. And I was really disappointed. I really thought they were all interested, they were all asking good questions. And I was showing them all these numbers, and they came back, Roundup sugar beets are not good for the country. Our own local kids.
15 years ago, I had 2 second grade teachers call me and ask me if I could help them during feed harvest, go to a farm and watch a harvest operation. So I called 2 farmers. They said, yes, it'd be fine. We called the one, they were moving, so they weren't digging. I went to the other one. There were about 42 kids on those school buses. I asked this question: how many of you kids live on a farm here in Powell? 6. How many of you 6 that live on a farm or a ranch here in Powell, Wyoming, your parents raised sugar beets? 3. So right here in the ag community, that was the percentage. They were absolutely amazed because what we showed them was that this particular operation saved their tops. And we explained to them that they raised 2 commodities, sugar and hamburger. Well, where do you get the hamburger? Well, cows run on the beet tops, they have their calves, they're fed the beet pulp, these kind of things, and they kill them, and you eat hamburger, you know? But that's what we're running into, and so too many of them have these little use-witches where they get right on the internet, and then just because it's on the internet, they think it's true.
Let me share a plant science information. Bob Perkle, who's been here today, is one of the master gardeners, and he started a program in the greenhouse on the research station. You guys on the advisory board know about it, but he started with kindergartners and teachers in PAL, bringing kids to that greenhouse, and now he's up to getting third graders, so kindergarten, first, second, and third graders coming to that greenhouse at least 3 times every spring about plants. He did it because the elementary kids in PAL only got 1 hour of science a month. 1 hour of science a month, and he wanted to make it plant science. So he started this program. He's got teachers linked into it now where they're actually coming and they're doing more plant science in the classroom. So it's a fundamental problem. They're trying to pass these tests that they have to take, but they can't teach
Does the University of Wyoming, I don't know where I heard that, maybe it was under ag in the classroom, do they still do that?
They still do that.
No, I've never seen that.
I've never seen it around
up here.
I don't know. We have a new FFA instructor who's new this year. Please say hi if you get a chance to meet him. He just got a grant for a greenhouse at the high school, which is going to be erected this spring. So.
I know there's still egg in the classroom in Cody.
Is there?
Because we participate with them on that quite a lot.
I don't think, I've never heard of that even in Powell.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the biggest things, and you touched on it, is education. And we in the communities have lost control of what we teach our kids, that we need to start down in the kindergarten and first grades and get back to good basic education. I've seen so many people coming out of colleges even that can't add and subtract in the field. They've got to have a calculator. They don't have a calculator. They cannot figure percentage of utilization on a grass plot. And to me, that's, we don't teach any history. we're teaching a different method of mathematics,
they're teaching
they aren't
they're
getting
teaching them to pass the
good,
test, to get a good
basic
score.
education.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's much.
We've got a long way from sugar beets, haven't we?
But it's all by state
Can I actually
law.
have that conversation more?
I will tell you one other thing. I agree with the education deal. Educating kindergartners is going to take a long time for us to see the benefit of. When we bring tours out to our dairy, and we bring first, second, third graders, and our dairy is no show place, believe me, but they come out, and we'll take, one of the funnest things we do is we'll put our hand under a cow and we'll strip some milk in our hand. And we'll say, how much butterfat do you think is in that milk? Straight from the cow, okay? Hasn't been processed, hasn't had anything done to it. And without fail, the mothers and fathers of these poor kids say, oh, 90%, or 80%. And the answer, and I can see some questions here, it's about 3.5% fat. But that's the uphill battle we have. We just have this negative connotation of agriculture or food.
Really, get their food in the grocery store.
Yeah. So yeah, start educating them, but educate the young families that are spending the money on the darn products too.
Well, the sugar industry has a lobby effort out in the lobby for, on like that, but, and they go to all these senators' offices from all over the United States, and 80% of the time they'll walk into and it's not just the senators and the congressmen that they talk about the staffers, and really the staffers are the guys that make all the decisions. Most of those guys, and our own guys will tell you, they've never seen sugar beets, they get their sugar from the grocery store. And if it's sugar, it's cane sugar, because they don't like beet sugar, because they can taste the dirt.